Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Brizer Show with me, Brizer, at grism.blogspot.com, where Mammy welcomes you to the best news aggregate site on the World Wide Web. It's good to have your company, folks, and if you'd like to join us in the chat room, click on the HTML5 chat link on the top right-hand side of the page, just below the player of your choice. I'd also like to welcome listeners of Eurofolk Radio. Good to have you all on board. And I'd also like to make it clear to all listening that I reserve all rights to my words, as do my guests. So good evening, everyone. It's August 9th, 2021. Hope you're doing well. Just briefly before I bring our guests on, I'll just give you an update on our good friend Graham Hart, who, an absolute travesty of justice there on Friday, where he was sentenced to initially 32 months in jail for expressing his opinion, basically. That was reduced to 15 months, and it's quite possible he might get out in a year, or maybe even less than that, on a tag, and that's being worked on at the moment. And I was speaking to his daughter yesterday, and or the day before, I think it was, yeah, and she was telling me that they hope to get him into a low. He's in Exeter Prison in the UK, which is in Devon. But they're trying to get him transferred out of there into a more low security prison where he'll be treated a lot better, and the one thing they're afraid of is he is on medications and he doesn't need them, and he has been on them for years, and unfortunately that was his weak spot. And when he was in prison, as you know, for a couple of weeks there 2 months ago, but he was only held there for about 2 weeks, and he got out on kind of remand. But anyway, on bail, and but they denied him his medications when he was in there, pretty much, or he didn't have full access to them, and he suffered greatly because of it, and it weakened him badly. So that's what his family are mainly concerned about, is getting his access to those medications. But hopefully, if he gets moved out of this Exeter prison into this low security place, he will definitely he'll be looked after properly there, and and hopefully he'll get out in about 9 months to a year. We'll see how it goes. But just another update on that. Seemingly on the same day in that courtroom, there was a known paedophile who has been up in court a few times, and he was given a 2-year suspended sentence, right? So there was a guy who was a real threat to children in Cornwall. He walks free unless he reoffends again. But Graham goes down. I mean, where is the justice? I mean, this is just, I'm speechless on this, and I think about it, it's unreal what's going on. But that's the world we live in, folks. And so that's the update. I'm not going to dwell any more on it. I did a show with Giuseppe there on the Inside the Eye Live show on Saturday. And Giuseppe actually did 2 shows in a row there. And we kind of just, this topic of Graham was discussed quite extensively. So if you want to know a bit more about the context of the whole thing, you can go and listen to those shows which went out on Saturday, and they're on the Grism site there now to listen to. So with that said, I'm going to introduce our 2 guests tonight, and first of all up is Jerry Marzinsky. Jerry's been on the show a couple of times before. It's good to have him back again. Jerry was a licensed psychotherapist before he retired, and he's 35 years experience working with schizophrenics and other psychiatric patients in state hospitals, state prisons, and hospital emergency rooms. He also he's been studying the whole concept of schizophrenia, and realizing that it's not an actual disease the way it's explained by the medical journals. That these hallucinations that they allegedly get are not actual hallucinations, but they're actual voices, and they're real living invisible entities. And Jerry's helped an awful lot of people about this. He's really looking into this big time. And I think you should also go and listen to the previous show that I did with Jerry with my good friend Shakti, who's a shaman. And a lot of good, very interesting points were raised in that show. And I think that's a good show to go back to and listen to again, to kind of get a feeling of what Jerry's talking about here. And also joining us tonight is, I think, a colleague, I'd say, of Jerry's. Her name is Jenny Lim, and she has a diverse working life, from secondary school teacher to a transpersonal therapist, dance teacher, and social entrepreneur over the last 30 years. With more than 20 years in the personal development sector, Jenny has treated a wide variety of issues while specializing in the treatment of chronic fatigue syndrome. She's developed a protocol and training package for her colleagues in treating CFS and has trained over 70 therapists. She's traveled extensively in her work across Europe, Australia, and Asia, giving talks and workshops and mentoring her fellow therapists. Her passion for authenticity has driven her supervisory work with her fellow therapists, inspiring and encouraging them to be present spiritually in the therapy setting. Jenny is a practicing Buddhist of nearly 40 years. She is also a recovered schizophrenic, having seen the last of the inside of a psych ward in 1987. She uses both of these experiences to model and inspire others to stand up in their power, take up agency and own their lives. She has been keeping a keen eye on the international duplicity and political and economic elitism over many years, understanding that the fabric of our society has been gravely threatened. And to this end, in her new social entrepreneur role, she's established a vegetable growing company, which is called Growing Veg and Other People's Gardens, and it's to encourage people to take up responsibility for growing their own food. So there we go. So welcome, Jerry and Jenny, to the show. Good to have you here. Who will go first? So we'll go Jerry first, I think, because you kind of introduced me to Jenny. So we'll start with you, and we'll take it whatever direction you want to go.
Okay. Well, what I'd like to do is that the mental health systems in Britain and the U.S. are very similar. They're both drug-fueled merry-go-rounds, and both of them spiritually devoid. It doesn't work. Despite the proliferation of new drugs that psychiatry comes up with. So the way this works is the psychiatrists have made up every single one of those disorders in the DSM. They started out with 3, and in the DSM-4 there were 297. In the DSM-5 they make them up. They get together in a group and they vote these things into being. And then the pharmaceutical industry goes behind them and formulates all these toxic drugs to treat the symptoms. They don't have any cures for anything. They don't know what causes these mental illnesses. All they do is describe them. So despite the $330 billion a year that the pharmaceutical industry and psychiatry are making together on selling drugs and their appointments. Now, the gross national product of all Britain is $680 billion. So these guys are raking in about half the national product of Britain. Yeah, they're making a lot of money on this, and they don't want it interfered with. And be damned to the truth. So they have no science behind their diagnoses. They have no cures. All they're doing is pushing drugs. And the system was taken over back in the, what was it, the 19, it was back in the late 1800s. Now, the pharmaceutical industry is constantly saying, well, we got to charge a massive amount for these drugs because we invest tons of money, billions of dollars in developing them. That's not so with antipsychotic drugs. These phenothiazine drugs were discovered by accident in the late 1800s in a dye lab in Europe. They found out that it calmed people down and put them to sleep while they were working with the dyes. They extracted that and they brought it over to the U.S. and began using it in psychiatric hospitals. And what it would do is it was a major tranquilizer. So it would knock these guys down. It would knock them out. And they wouldn't be causing any problems. Psychiatry latched onto that, and they turned it into how much money are those suckers making? They prescribed. There was over 600 million prescriptions in the U.S. for antipsychotic drugs last year. Right. So the drug companies are making $13.69 billion on the sales of antidepressants alone.
Yeah.
And let me see. $20,539 million on the sale of anti-anxiety drugs. So they're making a fortune, and they're basing all this on that mental illness is a biological entity. It is not, and they have no proof for it. They have no tests to test for any of their diagnoses. So what happened back in the 1800s? Psychiatry was the stepchild. They grabbed onto these phenothiazine drugs and held on to them with their lives. Then they teamed up with Big Pharma to push propaganda that mental illness was due to a chemical imbalance of the brain. So if they didn't have some physical malady to treat, the question becomes, what are they treating? Yeah. So they started off with 3 items in their dictionary or DSM. It's their dictionary and statistical manual of mental illnesses. They're up to 297,000 or 297 now, and they have no lab test to test for any of that. So, from there, Big Pharma went and and it started off in the early 1900s. Scores of natural healing methods were available back then. They had, natural cures. They had the Tesla violet ray. They had ozone therapy, naturopath therapy. When doctors began prescribing alternative treatments to drugs, the Rockefellers and the Carnegie Foundation, they didn't like that. They were losing market shares. So they had the political and the monetary means to stop it. So in 1910, the Carnegie Foundation and Rockefeller Group, they sponsored the infamous Flexner Report, which shut down medical schools teaching subjects outside of mainstream pharmacology. So what they did is they paid off Congress to pass laws benefiting Big Pharma. So if they weren't teaching in their medical schools pharmacological-based medicine, they could not issue a medical certificate or a medical degree. So they broke into the education area to the medical schools and virtually said, okay, you don't teach that all these mental illnesses are due to biological cause that can be treated with drugs. Forget it. We're not giving you any funding. We're not giving you any grants. We're not publishing any of your stuff. So that reduced it down to like 2 medical schools. So they took over the medical establishment. And in 1910, they came out with that Flexner Report where they paid off Congress to, promote their drugs. All right. So any medical school that taught any treatment outside of drugs could not legally license doctors. They lost grants and fundings. Doctors who were prescribing any treatment besides psychopharmacology or pharmacology were threatened with the loss of their license. So doctors at that point lost the freedom to prescribe alternative therapies. So in the 1800s, psychiatry was a stepchild of the medical establishment. And they, like I said, they locked on to these drugs, and those drugs have proliferated since then. So now the entire the entire mental health system is dominated by psychiatrists who are the lackeys and the drug pushers for Big Pharma. So they come up with these diagnoses, and Big Pharma comes up behind them and develops drugs to treat these fabricated diagnoses. So with this drug treatment that they've been using for 100 years now, what's the result? Well, here in the United States, 47,500 people kill themselves a year. This is our mental health system. 47,000. That's as many people as were killed in Vietnam almost. Yeah. Suicide was the second leading cause of death among individuals between the age of 10 and 34, and the fourth leading cause of death among individuals between ages 55 and 44. There were nearly 2.5 times as many suicides in the United States as there were homicides. So is this a mental health system that works? And this is just suicides. Look at all the people who are depressed and have other maladies. These drugs that they're dishing out do not work. They merely suppress symptoms. And for psychotics, what they do is they're major tranquilizers. They're kind of like chemical lobotomies.
Yeah, that's it. So Jenny, we'll pass over to you now. I briefly kind of read out your bio there, but you've got an interesting background as well. Like you suffered from schizophrenia yourself, or what's called schizophrenia, and you were obviously helping other people now, and you've, I suppose, found your way, I suppose, which is great, And obviously you're linked in with Jerry there now, and you're obviously understanding what's really going on here. So do you want to tell us how it's all started for you?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Ryan. It was nice to hear Jerry's, summarise what's been going on in the psychiatric world. So few people know the truth about anything to do with modern medicine. But basically, I mean, going back many years, I can't even think how many now. I was 23 at the time and I'm 57, so 34 years or so. I was diagnosed schizophrenic and I was put in a hospital in Liverpool.
Jenny, tell them how that came about and how you were treated once you were put in there.
Yeah, what do you mean? How I actually got in there?
Yeah, how you got in there and how they treated you once you were in there and the drugs. What was it like to be on those drugs?
Yeah, horrendous, absolutely horrendous. But I think what happened was the way I got in there. Firstly, I was super stressed, and I just turned into this, I suppose, possessed person. You're just not in your normal faculties at all. So I was taken in. And in the first, I don't know, maybe a week, because everything gets a bit fuzzy, in terms of time frames, they put me on something which I think was Largactil. Does that sound familiar, Jerry?
What is it?
Largactil. I think it was Largactil, which actually paralyzes your body. I don't know if they really understand what happens to the mind when you go onto these drugs, but they paralyze your body. It doesn't stop the mind working. You are still absolutely in the floridness of schizophrenia. You're hearing things, you're seeing things, you perceive everyone's out to persecute you and punish you. There's hidden demons and devils, you can see them, they're all around you. It's like the world and his dog are on your case, they're persecuting you, and you feel it, but your body is completely paralyzed. So
it's a control issue. They use that to control you.
Yeah, absolutely, and it is torture.
And here you're helpless. You're helpless. Yeah. You can't move, with all this stuff going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And they do that to observe you, which is really bizarre because you think, how can they observe you if you can't move? But then I think they took me off of that and put me on something called stelazine and haloperidol, and I think the stelazine. I used to call them my uppers and downers. So the stelazine gave me loads and loads of energy, and the haloperidol brought me back down. So there was a kind of like ridiculous, synergy there. But the treatment, I was threatened many times with injections and with sectioning, which means that you have your freedoms taken away from you and you are locked up essentially. Fortunately, I never got that bad. They would often say, you've got to show me the inside of your mouth if you've not, we want to see that you've swallowed your drugs, because some people were artfully very clever at not swallowing their drugs and spitting them out. So that you were treated really like a second-class citizen, really, absolutely. I think. Going back, their hearts were in the right place. They didn't realise what they were doing. They know not what they do. This is the whole biblical thing. They do not realise what they're doing. They think they're doing the best.
Right, because that's what they were taught in medical school.
Exactly. And, I felt sorry for them in some ways. Even at the time, even though they were abusive, they thought they were doing their best, and because they don't understand what is actually happening, when people lose their minds in that way, they assume you're stupid and docile, and therefore you just have to be manipulated and controlled and locked up, basically. So it's very heavy-handed. But I don't think they ever really, really meant it. I don't think they ever really understood they were causing more harm than they were, curing. But it was pretty gruesome, really. But in a curious kind of way, maybe it was my character, but I quite enjoyed it in other ways as well, because for the first time in years, I was indulging all of my artistic qualities. I was able to paint and draw, and I would sit there for hours writing poetry, painting, dancing, drawing. It was almost like something was burning through me. It had to come out. Absolutely years and years of suppressed stuff was coming up, and it just had to come out. They thought it was obviously wacky and completely bizarre, but for me it was highly therapeutic. But they were, I wouldn't say they were facilitating that, but they were allowing it, if you know what I mean. They were allowing me to do that. It was part of my personal journey, therapy. But the crazy thing is, years later, 20 years later, I'm practicing psychotherapy. I've become a school teacher. I used to teach at the end of my 20s. So I came out of psychiatric when I was 23. I'd only been in 6 months. I was drugged up to the eyeballs. My medical record says we must be careful not to let her come off her drugs. It's important that she stays on them. So I got my medical records back years later. So, I didn't want to stay on drugs. They just made me feel clumsy. They made me feel sick. I didn't want to be on them. So I just cold turkey.
Tell them what it was like to be on those drugs.
You're very stiff. You can't move. It is a chemical kosh. It is like you are cracked over the head with a chemical kosh. There's a lot of pacing. You feel unbalanced, like you can't move properly. I can't remember all of it now, Jerry. There's such a lot. I sent you some notes over. I don't know if you got them.
Yeah, I saw those. There's reports that they feel nervous and sedated at the same time.
Yes.
Sexual dysfunction. Yeah, you want to tell them what that felt like?
What, the sexual dysfunction or nervous and sedated?
No, not so much that as feeling nervous and sedated at the same time.
What it is there is an absolute fear. I can't describe to you how profound the fear is with schizophrenia. You are terrorized and terrified. Nothing is familiar. Even though you can see with your eyes where you are in a different realm. Nothing is familiar. So the terror of being in a realm that is unfamiliar and no one can reach you. And so that's the nervousness, that's the anxiety, that you're stuck in a place that no one can reach you. And at the same time, you're sedated. It's like you're held down by these chemicals, so that you can't express how you feel. It's impossible. I think that's how I would describe it, Jerry.
Yeah, and you can't defend yourself.
No. No, you can't defend yourself, and you can't go anywhere. And I remember talking to one of the doctors, and he said to me, "Jenny, you come from a good family. Why are you like this?" And I'm thinking, what? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? How can you? What's that got to do with anything?
Oh God. What? It's like what do they have at the Monty Python show over there?
Yes.
Yeah.
I know. It is pretty desperate.
Now, how much time did they spend diagnosing you? I mean, before they started shoveling pills down your throat. How much time did they spend talking to you?
None whatsoever. Nobody spent a moment speaking to me. It was that's not true. There was a doctor called Dr. White, and he said to me, "Can you hear voices?" And my head was so packed full of I don't know what that it took me a moment to understand what he was saying. And he said, "Do you want to kill yourself?" And I said, and then he asked more questions, and I just said, "Wait a minute, just one at a time, please, one at a time," because my head was so packed full of noise.
And were you able to answer any of them before he hit you with another one?
No, it was impossible. It was just question after question after question. So, of course, because I couldn't answer because my brain wasn't computing, you know, what do you do? They've obviously put me down as schizophrenic, which I was. I mean, let's put it another way. They think that when people get into this state, they are hallucinating and they are so-called schizophrenic. They're not in their normal mind.
Yes,
it's true.
They're less than human.
Less than human, yeah. It's true. But none of them know why or where or how or even care. They don't care. They just want to identify the symptoms and check off their tick list or tick off their checklist.
And then dish out drugs.
To dish out drugs.
See, that's one thing I saw when I was working at the state hospital. Nobody was curious. Not one of the staff was curious, other than myself, about what the voices were telling these patients.
Yeah.
You know, and they were getting into trouble all the time listening to their voices. And not one staff out of their thousands of staff there ever took the time to ask them, what are these things telling you?
Mm.
That's amazing that they can't just sit down, someone just sit down with somebody and say, okay, what's going on inside your head? Tell us what's happening, or,
No, they're mentally
So it's just, you're hearing those voices again there, Joe, here's more pills. And there you go, shut up now.
Well, that's exactly what happens. So they don't tell them if the voice, they give them a dose of the meds, the patients feel how awful it is. And then the next time they have a meeting, the psychiatrist said, well, how are you doing? And well, I'm still hearing the voices. So they get dosed again. They increase the dose or they change it to something stronger. Yeah. So after that, the patients don't tell them anything. Yeah, I'm doing fine. I'm doing great. No, I don't need any more meds. I'm happy. So they lie to the psychiatrist in mass scale because they don't want any more of these meds. Those meds are not abusable meds. They're not anything that anybody would want to take.
It's really bad news.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, incredible.
I mean,
so based on you probably told them, hey, I'm hearing voices. Next thing you know, you're on medications.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, I have very faint memories of all this now. Although, that's another story. I'll tell that another time. But yeah, I mean, I don't remember. My head was far too busy. I don't know what was going on really. I remember these ridiculous questions. I don't remember whether that was the very first time I went in or whether it was, a week or two in that I had those questions asked. But certainly they observed my behaviour, and I was all over the place, running around like a delirious person, sort of completely possessed by something. I didn't know what, obviously, but. Yeah, and I think their initial tactic is just drug them up, calm them down.
Yeah.
And then we'll sort out what's going on afterwards,
Well, they do that. They do that anyway. It's 99% of whoever walks into a psychiatrist's office is going to come out with some kind of drug. So everything revolves around these drugs, and they don't spend hardly any time talking to the patient, trying to figure out what the initial problem is, where these problems are coming from. And when I was at the state hospital there, they were giving shock treatments, and these were brutal shock. I almost fainted the first time I saw one. So it wasn't the doctors that were so much prescribing this as it was the attendants who say, hey, Johnny Doe over there is causing us a lot of trouble this week. I think he needs another treatment. He'd be put on the line for a shock treatment. They'd put these electrodes on his head and I don't know how many volts, but they'd give him a giant needle of muscle relaxation, muscle relaxant, a giant hypodermic needle. It looks like a horse needle. And I asked them, why do you have to do that? And they said, well, if we didn't do that, their bones would break when we shocked them. So here's modern, psychiatric treatment, their shock treatment. It was used as a punishment and a control tactic.
Yeah. So Jenny, how did you eventually break out of this then? Because it seems to me this was like day after day after day, and it was like,
yeah.
So something happened where you kind of managed to break through and just break free. I suppose it's mental bondage, isn't it?
Yeah, it is mental bondage, and I did break free. And I was in Liverpool in the northwest of England, and my parents were from Essex, so it's 200 miles south. And my mum really petitioned to get me to a hospital local to Essex so that I could come home. And I got there, and I was in there for a few weeks, and then they sent me home. And it was when I got home that I felt so sick and uncomfortable on these drugs. They sent me to a day centre, and I felt so sick and uncomfortable. And I had various outreach workers, from the National Health Service coming to visit me. And eventually, I just decided I didn't want them anymore, and I didn't want them visiting me. And I didn't answer any of the invitations to go back into the day centre. I didn't answer any of the invitations for them to come over and visit me anymore. I didn't go to a doctor again, and I literally just came off the drug. And my background, my family background at the time was quite harsh. I mean, they weren't bad people, but it was quite harsh. They didn't understand what I'd been through. They were wondering why I was sitting around the house and I should have been going to work. I mean, literally, I was fresh out of psychiatry. So basically, it was kind of like, you can't afford to sit around the house and just do nothing. You've got to get your ass into gear and go and get some work. So I thought, I can't work like this. This is ridiculous. So I literally just cold turkeyed. I just stopped taking them. And it was the best thing I ever did. I mean, after that, I slept for a year. I mean, I did go to work. I got a job, but I was sleeping from something like 8 in the morning till 8 in the evening till 7 in the morning. Every night. I was exhausted, and it took about a year for me to come through that. But so I think I just took myself off of it because I just thought, I can't do this. I'm not doing this. And fortunately for me, I never went back to it.
Mm-hmm.
I was just very fortunate.
That's good, yeah. Because for a lot of people, they're trapped there forever, aren't they? They'll never break free of it. That's the problem. And we're seeing that also with a lot of people now who are hooked to the big pharma drugs like antidepressants and whatever, and they cannot get off them. It's worse than heroin or any of these drugs,
Yes. Yeah, it's okay while they're taking them. They try to go off them, especially Wellbutrin is one that they put, and they try to get off of that stuff.
There's OxyContin and there's a few others. Percocet is a very strong painkiller, I believe.
Yeah.
They're so damn addictive,
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't until 20 years later, after I left the whole, situation, and I was in practice as a therapist, that I was invited to give a talk at a new charitable network in my area. And it was an inaugural talk by the community mental health team. And they asked me to talk about isolation and stigma within the mental health service. Well, I had the floor. So I told them exactly what I thought of their system. And, I'm articulate. I'm not stupid. I've got a degree and a postgraduate and, 3 years study in psychotherapy. So, when I say I told them what I thought, I was very civil, but I told them, and the room was full of service users. So in other words, people with mental health issues. And at the back, there were all the social workers and the psychiatrists. Well, when I was talking, the service users, the mental health, where they were cheering, they were absolutely, because it was like they were seen, they were seen for the first time. The psychiatrists and the social workers were totally mute. Their faces, you could have just slapped them, and they wouldn't have moved. They refused to talk to me afterwards, which was fascinating.
I know what that's like.
Yeah.
So, Jenny, do you feel those drugs did you any good?
It's difficult to say, because nowadays I would say to anyone who's on a drug, come off of it as quickly as possible. You've lost your humanity. You don't know who you are. If you're on a drug, you can't even feel your pain. You need to feel your pain. you need to really search deeply for who you are beyond all of this trauma, superficial stuff that, if you allow it to, defines you. You have to go deeper than that. But at the time, the drugs were horrendous. But I do wonder if there were 3 sets of drugs. There was the Largactil, the Stelazine, and then there was one more, and I can't remember what the last one was. But the last one seemed to change gear in me. When they put me on that, it kind of brought me right down. And I think that last drug probably damped everything down. It kind of brought me back down. All the others were kind of feeding the psychosis. They were feeding the energy, the hyperness. And this last one seemed to bring me down. Now, it also stopped me moving, made me clumsy, I couldn't do anything. So there are lots and lots of disadvantages. But I think on some level, it brought me back down. Now, I hate to even admit that because I don't go for drugs at all. I would avoid them like the plague now. But I think I have to admit that that's probably what happened.
Well, I think you're right. There's a lot of patients that I couldn't reach unless they were on those drugs. They had to be brought down before I could even reach them. Otherwise, they were unreachable. But they shouldn't stay on those drugs. The antipsychotics, all the phenothiazines, actually shrink your brain with long-term use, and they rot out your peripheral nervous system. So they're doing physiological damage. And the side effects of those drugs are not side effects. Those are the effects. Those are toxic effects of these drugs. They may calm you down, but they're doing irreversible damage to your brain. And they started finding that in the autopsies of schizophrenics that were in hospitals for long periods of time. All their brains were shrunken. So when they brought that up, the pharmaceutical industry and psychiatry went, "Oh no, it's not our drugs. It's the schizophrenia germ, whatever it is. It's shrinking their brain." So they did it. They put monkeys on those drugs. They put rats on those drugs, and found out that their brains were shrunk too. But never have I seen a psychiatrist sit down with a patient before prescribing those drugs and telling them how dangerous those drugs actually are or could be, and the side effects that they could expect, and what long-term use of those drugs would do to you. Has ever one of the psychiatrists ever told you anything about what those drugs do and how dangerous they are?
No.
Can I ask you, Jerry, about Sigmund Freud, because he was the man who came up with psychiatry, basically modern psychiatry. And what's your take on him? Because he seems to be the man who's really started all this off, and suddenly everyone's mental health got screwed up after him. Would I be correct in saying that?
Well, the psychotherapy of Freud was expensive and slow. So he came up with the id, ego, and superego, which was a construct. I mean, it's a mental construct, just like schizophrenia is. I mean, it's a mental construct with made up variables. Okay. Now Freud and his group, when psychiatry came up with these phenothiazine, they wanted nothing to do with that. They said that's not the way to go. But Freud at least took the time to talk to the patients and kind of dig down, like Jenny was saying, feel your pain, go through it, what happened in the past. I mean, that's how psychiatrists used to be before they grabbed onto these drugs and just started pushing drugs for the pharmaceutical industry. At the worst, Freud didn't do anywhere near the damage that these drugs are doing. I mean, I've seen hundreds of patients in the state hospital that had the Thorazine shuffle. Their nervous systems were so fried out they couldn't even walk with a normal gait anymore. Freud was more a talk therapist, trying to.
But he was putting some crazy ideas into people's heads, though. All this sexual repression and all.
All that sexual stuff. Yeah.
And then Kinsey came along after that and kind of continued, and it really messed with people's heads, didn't it? And that then, you think something happened where, like I said, where do these voices come from then? You know, what happened? Does something happen in the brain where something moves in, a kind of an evil demonic entity just moves in and starts talking to you and telling you that you're not worth it, and you're this, and you're dirt, and whatever, and do what I say, you know? Well, what do you think happened there? Because, and that's when Big Pharma really got into full gear, was around that time, kind of.
Well, where they
50s type of thing, 60s.
Yeah, when Thorazine came out. So where they jumped in was they went, okay, we got this major tranquilizer. We give it to the schizophrenics. They calm down. They act fairly reasonable for a period of time. But if they go off it, they're right back to where they started again. It's all over again. And they almost all of them invariably go off it because it's such nasty medication. So the pharmaceutical industry started making money selling this stuff, and they went, oh, okay, well, it's got to be a chemical brain imbalance because we're putting a chemical into the body that affects the brain, and it's giving us a positive outcome. So it's got to be a chemical brain imbalance, but they have no proof of it, none. There is, matter of fact, it's been disproved at this point. So they started off with blaming mothers with the way they raised the kids. I mean, they've had excuse after excuse after excuse of what causes schizophrenia. And the latest one, the chemical brain imbalance, you see how much money they're making on this. So they don't want a cure. They want to keep treating these illnesses forever with their expensive drugs. And those drugs here in the U.S., I mean, to get a month's supply of antipsychotic drugs here in the U.S. cost $800 to $1,000. You can go across the border to Mexico and get the same number of pills made by the same exact company for $75. That shows you what scammers these people are. They're just, raking every country for as much as they can get out of it for it.
Yeah, I know. And I suppose, Jenny, what you see on this side of the pond is you have the the NHS in the UK, and we got the HSE over here in Ireland to work pretty much in a similar fashion. And they're, in the US, of course, it's more private healthcare and all that. But so you can see where the pharmaceutical companies can move in there better because it's all about profit. But it's not that. It's pretty much the same over here as well, isn't it? Except it's more socially, or what do they call it, socialized medicine type of thing, where the government are buying all the drugs and they just dole them out anyway. It doesn't really matter. And the pharmaceuticals still make a killing one way or the other.
Oh, massive. Billions of dollars a year.
No.
So Jenny,
go on, you asked, Jerry.
When did you figure out that the voices were not who you were, but separate entities? At some point you came to that conclusion.
Well, funnily enough, I was just making a few notes to see when did that come in. So over the years, I didn't know at the time what was going on. I knew I was in a different realm, I was in a different world. I knew there was lots of scary entities around me, but I didn't really have too much to do with it at the time. It was only subsequently when I came out and I started to reflect over years, because for the first 10 years, I didn't really want to go back there. So I just didn't even think about it. And then I became a teacher. And it was only then subsequently when I started to do my training as a psychotherapist that I started to really ask questions. What happened to me? I don't know what happened to me. So I was quite a successful therapist, doing all this training my colleagues and such. And I started to interview people from all over the world on their attitudes. These were, when I say people, they were therapists, they were quirky people on the edge of convention who had different ways of looking at the world. And I started to really sort of question, what did I go through? And it was only as I was sort of actually in practice teaching other people and showing other people that I had to then go back and think, what happened to me? So there were various things. When I did all this interviewing, I came across a guy called Malidoma Some. I didn't interview him, but I read his book called Of Water and the Spirit. And he was a chieftain. He was a tribal chieftain from Burkina Faso. And he said that people that hear voices travel to different realms, and these people are the future healers of life. And he said that when the people in their tribes hear voices, they are totally looked after and totally coached and mentored and cherished, because these people go to different realms and they bring back knowledge and they bring back healing modalities and they bring back things with them. So you have to revere them. And it was such a completely different approach to the Western attitude, which was just, there's something wrong with these people, let's just suppress everything. And then I came across a guy called Clancy McKenzie who said that all people with schizophrenia have had trauma prior to the age of 2. So I thought, what could that trauma have been? Well, my sister was born around the age of my age of 2. So maybe, and he said, subsequent children can traumatize a pre-existing child, etc., etc. So I thought, okay, that's an idea. Then there's all these other modalities, soul retrieval, because I significantly had a memory of a part of a woman in front of me who was very angry. I absolutely intuitively knew when I was in hospital, schizophrenic, I knew she only had a quarter of her soul in front of me. And I knew her soul had flown away. And I thought, wow, soul retrieval. Maybe fragments of the soul get lost somewhere and, we have to bring them back. But then, to be fair, Jerry, I came across you about 2 years ago, and it was you that put words to the experiences that I had, which was that these are real entities. And I had met them many times, and they're still with me at times. They're not voices, and I'm not schizophrenic. I don't mean that in any way, shape, or form. But I am conscious of them.
Well, Sherry says the same thing. She said they come back and they hit her periodically to see what they can get away with. And when she blows them off, they disappear for a while, but they keep coming back.
Well, they don't keep coming back to me. What I occasionally get is a flash picture in my brain of something horrific. And I know that's them showing me a picture of something they want me to do. But it doesn't, they just absolutely, it's a momentary glimpse of something, some fear.
It's usually upsetting, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. But they can, they have absolutely no power in my life whatsoever. They have no leverage. But it was coming across you, Jerry, when you put words into it, and I thought, wow, this explains it all. So then I interviewed you, didn't I? It was about 18 months, 2 years ago. And it was only then, obviously, because that was just before this pandemic, this kind of crazy situation that we find ourselves in. And I think it was in the November before then. And then this kicked off. And then we went down that other route. So I interviewed you again, do you remember, just a couple of months ago? Mm-hmm. And we started looking at these patterns. I don't know if you want to go there again.
Oh, yeah. I'd like your... So what Jenny's talking about is over 45 years, I started recognizing certain patterns. First it was 1, then 2, then 3, but they kept coming and coming and coming. Mm-hmm. So if there's no chemical brain imbalance, if this is not due to genetics, then what are these patterns? Mm-hmm. And now we got up to like 23 patterns. And one thing I asked Jenny is, I gave her a copy and said, okay, let's go through these one by one, because if these voices are running patterns that are repeatable and predictable and unswerving, then they can't be hallucinations, as the psychiatric mafia is insisting. Yeah. Hallucinations don't run patterns. They're random. You can't predict what a hallucination is going to do or say. Yeah. But what you can predict what the voices are going to do and what they're going to say. And so if you can predict it, then they're not hallucinations. And so if that's the truth, which it is, then what in the blazes is psychiatry treating with all these toxic drugs?
Yeah.
All they're doing is suppressing symptoms. They have no idea what the cause is. They have no idea what the cure is. They have no scientific backing for any of their diagnoses, and they have no tests. This is far from medical practitioners who have tests for diabetes or sugar or blood ailment. I mean, they have lab tests where they can give the test, and there it is. It appears, and it's measurable. Psychiatry has nothing that's measurable. They have no tests. They have no scientific validity. They have no idea what the cause is. They have no idea what the cures are. So going through. So what happened is Jenny, after a year, Jenny contacted me. She heard me make a comment about the psychotic voices that schizophrenics hear are virtually identical to what the mainstream media and the deep state their propaganda is right now. They match up 1-to-1. So the psychotic voices match up exactly with what the deep state and the propaganda they're putting out to the world match. And as we go through these, I asked Jenny to add whatever experiences she might have to these. But as we go through these, watch and see if they don't match what the propaganda that CNN and BBC and all the rest of them, the mainstream media, are putting out right now. The first and primary one is negativity. The most common consistent trait of schizophrenic voices is that they are consistently negative, derogatory, insulting, abusive, and destructive. Although they might seem to be helpers for short periods of time, invariably they will turn around, and once they have the victims hooked and gain their trust, they'll begin attacking them and tearing them down, telling them awful things about themselves, putting confusing thoughts in their head, and messing them up. But you look at TV. You turn on the TV and it's just negative stuff. After one thing after another, the news is filled with negativity. Yeah. Jenny, do you remember any of the things those voices told you, or are they too far out?
I think that's just too far away in terms of negativity. I can't remember, to be honest. But I mean, if we look at the media at the moment, or if you look at the kind of drive that we've got at the moment with the anti-unvaxxed and the negativity coming out around those that are unvaxxed, and you've got this, I mean, it's just heinous what's going on at the moment,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
evil.
And it's not really the vaxxed people who are like that, it's the media pumping this out,
Yeah.
And these people really, oh man, I tell you, when this all comes out, I will not want to be in their shoes.
And it will. So some of the things that the voices do tell schizophrenic patients is, you're ugly, you're stupid, you're no good, nobody likes you, nobody loves you, nobody will ever love you, you'll never succeed at anything. And these are all thoughts that everybody has to different degrees. But with schizophrenics, it grabs hold of them, and immobilizes them. And there's different kinds of schizophrenia. There's some where, the person just whizzes out and they're gone. But the paranoid schizophrenia is the single biggest one. And that's where these voices are talking to them, telling them to cuss people out and attack people. And, research indicates that individuals diagnosed as schizophrenic and bipolar are responsible for 10% of all homicides in the United States and 33% of the mass killings. And that's these voices in there. After they're arrested, they say, well, why'd you do it? And the voices told me to do it. A Swedish study of 2,000 patients convicted of homicide or attempted homicide from 1988 to 2001 found 11% were schizophrenic or bipolar. So what these things do is they start taking control, and you have to battle for your own mind. So they start edging inward and just taking control, steadily taking control, until they got you and they're controlling you. And the reason they're doing that is to generate negative emotional energy, which they feed off of, and then they drain you. Did you ever feel drained after they came? Do you remember, Jenny?
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah. Trying to think. No, definitely felt very, very tired Exhausted. Yeah.
I remember they couldn't even get out of bed. They're so exhausted after being attacked by these things.
Oh yeah. So Jenny, how did you deal with that? I mean, you obviously knew they were coming at you again. It's kind of like this vampire, isn't it? Kind of constantly get into you. And you kind of got your garlic and your crucifix and your keeping you know what I mean? But how did you deal with that? I mean, do you just say, get the fuck out of here or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, literally, you just, I mean, for me, I acted out rather than my head was too full to compute anything. It was so chock-a-block with crap going on, voices, fears, anxieties. And I think the way they were communicating with me was to tap into my visceral fears. So I don't remember the thoughts. I don't remember the alienating thoughts, but I remember the fears, the terror, the way they terrorized me. And the terror kept me hyper vigilant, hyper alert. So I was running around like a mad thing, hyper vigilant, hyper alert. And it was that was making me so tired, because I was on constant guard, because these things were showing me pictures and they were confronting me with my fears constantly. I just didn't even have headspace to think what they were saying. It was just constant fear. That's all I can describe it as.
Yeah, that they want to generate negative emotion, which is what they feed off of. They can't produce it themselves. So what they're doing to us is kind of what we do to cows. You turn them loose out in the field, in the pasture, they eat grass, bring them back, you isolate them, you milk them, drain them, and then let them go again. So that's kind of what they're doing to schizophrenics. They can't produce that negative emotional energy themselves. They can't stand positive emotional energy, and they feed off of the negative. So that's why they're filling your head full of crap. Terrifying crap. They also have access to your entire memory. They can go in there and they can pull up stuff that you've done. I've had patients tell me stuff they did 25 years ago that they'd long forgotten about. The voices pulled up and threw in their face and said, look at what you did. You're such a rotten person. Even back then when you were young, you were a rotten person. Look at this. So they have complete access to the patient's memory, which is odd.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So another overriding thing is they're anti-religious. They don't like church. They don't like people, they're consistently anti-religious. Yeah. They resist the victim going to church, reading the Bible, or following through on any kind of positive spiritual path. They become volatile if the patient repeats the 23rd Psalm or the Lord's Prayer or any kind of positive spiritual verses. I've had patients tell me that the voices reacted to the repetition of the 23rd Psalm like worms thrown onto a hot frying pan. So, if these were hallucinations, why would a hallucination care anything about whether the person went to church or not?
Yeah. And Jenny, is that the reason why you became a Buddhist?
Oh no, I was a Buddhist before I went. Before I was in hospital, I was a Buddhist.
Do you reckon it helped you though through the whole thing? Because
definitely, 100%. I mean, when I went in, I would. There was a clock face. It was one of these very old Victorian buildings, and I chant to a scroll, and there was this clock face in the grounds. And because my scroll wasn't with me, and I wasn't, I didn't have any of my accoutrements with me, I would chant to this clock face and out loud, very loudly. And of course, it probably went down in my notes. I didn't get all my notes, but I got some of them. But it probably went down strange chanting noises, etc. But I would say that probably rooted me deeply into what we call our Buddha self. It rooted me into my Buddha self. And I think that may even have been why they couldn't get as close to me as they would have liked. And it may well have been why I came out so quickly as well. Within 6 months I was out, and within about 8 months I was off the drugs, because they can't get at you in the same way if you have a spiritual practice.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. They will try to destroy that first and then get at you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I do remember when I was in there, the anti-religious thing. I think I told you this, Jerry. There was a priest that came into the hospital, and I was left in a room on my own with this priest, and he said he was going to pray with me, and he put his hand on my stomach and the other hand on my back. Now, I heard him say profanities to me. Jerry says he thinks that was the voices, but I am quite sure I heard him say profanities, but I don't know. I don't know what he said. All I remember was the minute that started, I had to move away. Now, I do know how vulnerable mental health patients are in a hospital when the priests come in. You know, it's not unheard of, is it?
No.
So I don't know what that was. Whatever it was, it made me run for the hills, figuratively speaking. I didn't want to be near that guy at all. It could have been the anti-religious thing. It could have been the fact that they were speaking through him and I heard something else, you know, that wasn't, you know, a prayer to God that was coming from him. But, you know.
All right, guys, if you want to take a little quick break, that was a very fast hour, but if you want to take a quick break, we can continue. It's up to yourselves now.
How do you feel, Jerry?
It's up to you guys. I can hang in there if you want to. If not, we could take a 10-minute break or so.
No, just 4 minutes. Just I'll play a song here. I just thought this song was kind of apt. David Bowie sang a song called "I'm Deranged."
Let's go for it. Let's
go for that one, shall we? Yeah. So it's about just over 4 minutes, folks. So and we'll be back to you after this. Okay, welcome back, everybody. David Bowie there, and I'm Deranged. Apt title for a tune, considering what we're talking about here tonight. Our guest tonight, Jerry Marzinsky. JerryMarzinsky.com is his website. And Jenny Lynn from the UK as well. Both have been working together, and a very interesting show this, because it's just, again, so apt to what we're going through right now. Just one topic I want to bring up, because there's a lady I had on the show, and I've been talking to her quite a lot. Her name is Helen, and she's in the UK as well. And she's hearing voices as well, but it's not because of schizophrenia or anything. She reckons she's been targeted. She's a targeted individual, okay? And something happened when she was young. She reckons anywhere she's going, anywhere she goes or anything she does, she's hearing these voices. She seems to be followed and harassed in different places and stalked. So she reckons there's a kind of a coterie of people who are doing this, but she reckons big tech are playing a major part in this, because once she shields herself using magnets and different types of shielding, she's absolutely fine, not a problem. But once that shielding comes off, the voices are back again. What's your take on that side of things?
Well, I heard they can do that. You know, they can broadcast thoughts into people's minds. One of the things, kind of what we're doing now could be dangerous, because these voices do run specific patterns, and they can take that, and if they can broadcast it into people's mind, they can mimic these patterns, and then it would look exactly like paranoid schizophrenia. You know, who knows what they're broadcasting now, but it probably doesn't match these patterns. The other thing is that a lot of times the voices themselves want the patient to think that the government is putting these thoughts in their head, and that it's some outside entity or a Martian or the CIA. The problem is, if they adopt that and it is schizophrenia, then there's nothing they can do about it. It moves the locus of control outside of themselves, and the voices are off and running. Yeah, there's nothing you can do about it. The government is targeting you. It's coming from, outer space. You're helpless. They'll get you no matter where you go. So it's like, the gates of hell, where Dante put up there, all who enter here give up all hope. Yeah. So if they can convince, I'm sure, MK Ultra has some way to do this, because I've heard this over and over and over again. And I've heard, but if it is schizophrenia and the voices have convinced them that it's people from outer space or the government that are putting these thoughts in their head, and there's nothing they can do about it, then they're gone.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, this lady, she's strong enough to resist all this, but she has to use all this shielding to protect herself from it,
It's called voice-to-skull technology, isn't it? I mean,
yes.
It's pretty well known, and they are using it, and they have been using it for a while. And I think, partly it is to target individuals as an experiment. They just experiment to see how well it works.
Yeah. Because she was always saying, like, why me? Because, she's never done anything, I'm just...
Normally they come from families that are linked in some way to the Secret Service.
To the military, yeah. I think she said there was something to do with that. Her father might have done some involvement there,
Yeah.
So there might
usually it's families that are connected to the military or the Secret Services or something, and they co-opt their children, probably on some kind of, if they are taking part in something quite dark, their children are co-opted. They're just forced into it.
And then, of course, that people like that, if they start hearing all these crazy voices in their head, they're going to go to their doctor and say, doctor, I'm hearing all these voices. Oh, here's pills. Oh, we have to section you now, blah, blah, blah. And, of course, if you listen to what these targeted individuals say, you would think they're stark raving mad,
Oh, yeah.
And it's very hard for them to kind of live and talk to people about what's going on in their lives, because most people would just not believe them. Just say, no, you need help. Go and see the white coat still. Here, take a pill,
In my opinion, you can tell the difference between people that are haunted with voices and the ones that are, voice to skull. You can tell the difference. The voice to skull people are perfectly present. They're here right now. The schizophrenics are not here. You can see it in their eyes. You can feel it in their energy. They're not here.
Right.
And that's the difference for me. I've had clients that have been targeted individuals, and I've had clients who are schizophrenic. And the schizophrenics have a completely different energy.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very interesting. Yeah.
Well,
the thing is, there are people out there's not many people, but they are being targeted for some reason, and they're using the tech to do that. And
do you know Catherine Horton? Dr. Catherine Horton.
No.
She's an ex-CERN scientist, and she has implants in her. She has had implants placed in her. She thinks they've been scalpeled into her.
It's the same with this lady Helen. The same thing. She's got implants in her gums and stuff, and suddenly your gums started bleeding for no reason, and very strange things like that. Yeah.
Catherine Horton runs these electromagnetic detectors over her, and it goes off where the implants are. But I think, knowing now what I know about the vaccines and about the technology that they're rolling out, they have this self-organizing AI that they can spike your drink. They can give you an injection. It doesn't matter what. But the AI then self-organizes. I'm serious here. I mean, I'm I'm not losing my marbles. The AI self-organizes, and it forms into circuit breakers and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, well, it's like this graphene oxide shit that they're putting into the vaccine.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Actually, yeah.
Well, that's where they're going to kind of control people, isn't it? With this, whatever they're putting, and then they control their minds, control their body, and everything.
Yeah. So
we're all going to be targeted eventually,
Well,
if they get their way, but that's their plan, I think. Why is there such a drive for this? It is 24/7 propaganda. Like, get your job.
Right. With a 99.9% recovery rate, without that. So you go, why are they pushing it so hard?
I know. And like, even more evidence that this COVID doesn't even exist. It was all just put up on a computer.
Yeah, if it wasn't for the television and mainstream media, you wouldn't even know it existed.
Exactly. Yeah. So
BBC is the virus.
It is.
CNN, the whole lot, all these big
CNN, all the mainstream media.
Yeah, they're all in on this.
They are the virus.
And the
fact,
field,
Jenny, you were saying when you were there back in, when you were in hospital before, when you were younger.
Yeah.
You thought the doctors were kind of, they were trying, they thought they were doing the right thing, and that's the way they were trained and everything. But do you think it's the same now? I think probably the lower level doctors and nurses are thinking they're doing the right thing. Higher ups definitely know that this is a scam and this is,
No,
this is where we're gone to now, isn't it?
No, I think they think they're doing the right thing still.
I agree.
Do you think so?
They're brainwashed in the medical schools from the time, I remember when I was in the PhD program, they treated that DSM like a Bible. How dare you even question it? It was like their Bible. As a matter of fact, they're making $3 million a year selling that DSM. And the main purpose of it is to put down a diagnosis for the insurance companies to pay them. So they come up with all these new diagnoses and see which the insurance company will pay for. And then they go to this DM and write, 303.93, paranoid schizophrenia. So many hours of psychotherapy and these drugs, even though they don't spend any. I've seen how much time psychiatrists spend with patients talking to them. I mean, in the state hospital, it was like 10 to 15 minutes a month. And even in the private hospitals, you'd be lucky if you got, a half an hour during a week. It's this big machine. They come in, they fill them full of drugs, they kick them out. They use those drugs for a couple of months. They can't stand them. They go psychotic, and then they come back in again. And each cycle, the psych hospitals are raking in tens of thousands of dollars, and they keep them there until their insurance is expired, and then they kick them out again. It's a huge money-making scam beyond belief, and it's no wonder medical costs have soared. Let me sit.
Yeah. And Jenny, what do you do yourself with regards to combating this? Obviously, healthy lifestyle and all the rest of it has to play a major part in it, but it's also keeping your mind strong, because this is an attack on your mind. I mean, we're being attacked in our bodies with all this GMO food and all this fluoride in the water and all this other crap that they're pushing on us. But this.
Are you talking about how I stay sane in this crazy world?
How do you kind of get through? Yeah, what do you do? I mean, what's your kind of your shielding, so to speak?
Well, to do with what's happened in the last 18 months, if that's what you mean. Basically, I haven't stopped networking. I've brought swathes of people together, and we are networking like mad. And we're meeting and we're discussing and we're talking, and we're actually putting systems in place so that we can thrive and survive. Because one of the things with the Buddhism that I practice as well, we stay in as central a place in your own body as you possibly can be. Obviously, we're all subject to the propaganda at times, and sometimes it gets really dark, and you just think, oh my God, I don't want to see another thing. I don't want to hear another thing because it's just too much. But I think you've got to stay absolutely healthy. You've got to eat. In the last 18 months, I haven't even had a sniffle, let alone a cold. Eat organic, grow your own food, get plenty of fresh air, go outside, drink water, have a spiritual practice. Make sure you meet with people and stay connected with people. All of this nonsense about social isolation, that is a recipe for disaster. I mean, no matter, when I was doing my chronic fatigue studying, when I was trying to work out what was going on with chronic fatigue, I turned a lot of science around the damage of isolation, how isolation absolutely suppresses your immune system, makes you very vulnerable. And
that's one of the things the voices foster too. Don't trust anybody, don't talk to anybody, don't say anything to anybody, stay away from everybody, lock yourself in your bedroom. Yeah. Same thing. And it's very dangerous because that allows them to just jump in there and take over when you're isolated and bored.
That's right. Yeah. So I'd like to know more about chronic fatigue syndrome, because I found a little bit I find getting tired, but I it's not that bad, but sometimes I lay in bed a bit longer than I should, and I find sometimes I'm not sleeping that great at night. Now I'm wondering, is that the tech, the EMFs that are hitting me or whatever? I don't know, but
it's quite a minefield really. But I think I think let's just, on the fringes of what Jerry and I are talking about with schizophrenia, I think these demons have ways in anywhere your weakness is.
Yeah.
So wherever your weakness is, they'll find it. And it may not even be a florid schizophrenia. It could be something else. So the pattern I've uncovered with chronic fatigue syndrome is hypervigilance, hyper focusing on other people and what they think of you, making sure you're always doing the right thing. Don't let anyone down. Your life depends on it. You know, it's this kind of externally referenced, as long as everyone else is happy, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Instead of the healthy thing, which is like, as long as I'm happy, then I can make other people happy. But the chronic fatiguer turns it around the other way. Everyone else, I've got to be in service to everyone before me, and then I'll be okay. But
So
of course,
it's a fostering of fear again.
it is.
Yeah, it's all fear. It's a fear-based mind control is what
Yes.
we're subjected to right now. Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
And of course, you know, the people with chronic fatigue have been in training since they were very young, and you know, they've either been the eldest child in the family or they've been witnessing abuse of some other. You know, there's some sort of training, some sort of drama in the family of origin. And of course, if we go back to the demonic forces, they're going to hone in exactly where they need to. If you're not everything to everybody else, then you're a useless waste of space.
Yeah.
And that's the message you get.
Yeah, so they go for the Achilles heel of people. They see the weaknesses in people,
Absolutely.
and hone in there and get in and take over. Like
Carlos Castaneda said, they give us their mind.
Yeah.
So they actually can move into your mind, and they try to take it over. Yeah. But like I said, they have complete access to your entire memory. Everything bad that's ever happened to you, anything bad that you've ever done, they have complete access, and they just pull it up and they will just throw it in your face over and over and over again, generating that negative emotional energy, and then they suck it off.
Yeah.
You know, and they.
What's their end game then, Jerry? Like, what is it? Just to destroy us? Is that their?
Oh, they hate us. They hate us.
They hate us. Yeah.
They hate us, and they hate children more than anything.
Right.
Yeah. And they will go after marriages. They try to break up marriages. They put thoughts in people's head to, oh, she's cheating on you, or he's cheating on you, or where you been, or, you know, they go after marriages. They go after friendships. What they want to do is isolate you. And you'll notice that most schizophrenics try to isolate themselves, you know, and they want to stay away from everybody. They're afraid of what people are going to do or say or think, and the voices even tell them, you know, if you talk about us, they'll lock you up. They'll throw you in a mental hospital. Nobody's going to believe you. They actually tell them this.
Yeah.
And they run some very strange patterns on top of that. You know, they get louder after sunset consistently. You know, once the sun goes down, the voices get louder, and they get loudest at 3 to 4 in the morning. Yeah. You know, so, you know, those of you out here who work with schizophrenics or who are living with schizophrenics, don't take my word for it. Look for yourself. It's right there. Yeah. Just open your eyes and look, and you'll see these things for yourself. And so will psychiatry if they ever come off their high horse. You know, that psychiatrists will tell patients, oh, you hear voices, just ignore them. They will not be ignored. They get louder when they're ignored. You know, and you know, if the psychiatry was to take the time to follow up with their own recommendation, the patients would tell them, no, that doesn't work. They get louder. I remember doing that in the state hospital. I was sitting in there with a psychiatrist and a patient, and the patient asked me, well, what should I do? You know, when the voices come up, well, I'll give you medicines, and then you just ignore them. So I called him back a week later, and I said, how's that working? He says, it doesn't work at all. They get worse. They get louder when they're ignored. And I found that to be consistent. So after speaking to hundreds of schizophrenics, they all report that if they try to ignore the voices get louder. Another pattern.
Yeah. The problem is, Jerry, we're never going to get psychiatry in its current state of scientism and materialism to acknowledge the spiritual and the demonic part of life.
You're right. They are spiritually devoid.
The whole paradigm is about scientism. The whole paradigm is materialistic. Until we move over to a new paradigm, which I believe we're coming into, of vitalism and this whole kind of like real life is not just physical. It has many, many different dimensions. Until this can be embraced, we're never, ever going to have psychiatrists that see what's going on.
Well, yeah, that's right. And I've given up on them. I've given up on them. There's only 2 that I know that are aware. But what we can do is gut them. What they're doing doesn't work. The friggin' voices they call hallucinations are running patterns. They're not hallucinations. So what are they freaking treating? What are they dousing people with? They don't cure anything. They merely suppress symptoms. And what is it? How many billions of dollars? $100 billion they're getting every year from government and insurance companies. So the friggin' pharmaceutical companies are running the government.
Yeah. Have either of you heard of German New Medicine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I don't know much about it.
Yeah, it's Dr. Hammer who kind of came up with it, and he was a mainstream cancer doctor, and he did these CAT scans on these cancer patients, and he found lesions in the brain which connected to different parts of the body which had the cancer, and he noticed this pattern. And he was always thinking, well, where did this lesion come from? They didn't obviously get hit on the head or something. That came from an external force. Now, he didn't go into whether this was some kind of a demon or an entity that got in there, but I reckon it was. And now there's a kind of a protege of him, a Dr. Stefan Lanka, who's done a lot of work with regards to all this virus stuff and whether they actually exist or not. He's a fascinating guy. And he's looking at the whole spiritual side of it now and saying, there is something to this, and we have to look at it. Because this will destroy the big pharma paradigm,
Yeah.
Once but it needs to be talked about and understood a bit more. And yes, we can kind of use science to a point, but we have to also look at that the human body is a very complex thing. And, we're made, we're allegedly, according to the Bible, we're made in God's image, right? So why would God create some kind of a little virus inside of you that will kill you from the inside type of thing? And then it spreads around. That doesn't make sense, really,
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating topic, and it's something, it takes a lot of studying, I think, to get through it. But
one thing interesting they have done is they've hooked up EEG to the brain of schizophrenics and on an oscilloscope. And what they found is just a split second before the schizophrenic began hearing their voices, there was a register on the oscilloscope.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like this is the point at which they come in. There's a register, an electrical registration before the voice is even heard or understood. So it's like they're coming in from another place. It's like your brain is a radio set, and these things are coming in at a very low frequency, and the dial is set to that frequency. But if you increase the frequency to a more spiritual, uplifting frequency, you're tuning them out.
Yeah. That's what I found out, because I lost the fear myself, and it was only because, I think I told you the story before, Jerry, my late wife, who died, 12 years ago. She came back to me a year later. I didn't see her or anything, but I heard her. This is a kind of voice in my head, so to speak. But she told me that where she is, everything, she's fine. Don't be worrying about me. She says, you got things to do. It's going to be challenging, but you're going to be very interesting people, and it's going to be a great road, but it's going to be a challenging road, and you're going to go through struggles, but you'll be fine. And I'm going to look out for you. And then the third thing she said was lose the fear, and then she was gone.
Very cool.
And after that, my life did a 180 after that. And then and then I realized, when I realized the things that happened to me afterwards, because then I lost my job, and I had a mortgage, and the banks were coming after me and everything, and they were trying to take my house, and I spent 5 or 6 years in the court challenging them, and I'm still here. And because I lost the fear, I don't care about these bastards anymore. I really don't. And it's whether that's the government or any entities or whatever.
I'm the same way. They're going to have to kill me to stop me.
That's the only way. Put a bullet in my head. That's it.
Yep. And they're going to have to face an AK-47 before they get here.
Wow.
Man,
that's your Second Amendment over there.
That's right. I got plenty of ammunition for it too.
God, yeah.
So getting back to these patterns again. So again, we're hammering them with these patterns. If the voices are running patterns, they can't be hallucinations. So another pattern is they foster self-destructive behavior. The voices are consistently advising the victims to behave in self-destructive ways that increase conflict, turmoil, and suffering. They sabotage any positive movement on the part of the patient. The intent of the voices is very different from the intent of their victims for themselves. And that's one of the ways you can tell them apart. That, with the prisoners, the psychotic prisoners, I've talked to them, that was it your intent that you get thrown into prison? Was it your intent that you murdered somebody and you got thrown in here? And they said, no, I didn't intend to do that. Well, then whose intent was it? And they had to answer the voices because it was the voices that told them that. So,
yeah, well, if you look at the mainstream media, Jerry, they're saying wear face masks, stand 2 meters apart, and self-isolate. I mean, this is all hugely self-destructive.
Oh yeah, it's massively destructive. That's the worst thing they could do. And that's one of the goals of the voices too. They foster isolation. They want the person to isolate themselves so they have complete control. So yeah, that's one of their goals, is to destroy marriages, positive relationships with friends. The ultimate aim of them is to shut out all others out of the victim, away from the victim, so they have complete access to him without interference. Because if they don't get...
Sorry, Jerry, to interrupt, but let's explain why. Because I've tried to explain to people who I know are intelligent, right? I've got a good brain in their head. And I try to explain the absurdity of this nonsense that's going on right now, right? And they don't get it.
Yeah.
What's happening there? Have they been taken over or what? Because when I look at them and when I talk about this, I can actually see the veil coming down. The shutters are closing in, and I go, I'm not getting through here.
Well, I see
it's
it
very
myself.
kind of frustrating for me, and I have to kind of go, shit, we're in a bad way here.
Yeah. Well, you look at, so you see what's happening here in the U.S. I'm sure it's the same in Britain. People go to work, they work hard, they come home tired, they're exhausted, they have a house, they have kids, they got maintenance to do, they got shopping to do. They get home, they turn on the news, they eat dinner, turn on the news, they get brainwashed, turn it off, and go back to bed. And that's exactly where the deep state wants to keep them. They don't want them listening to alternative, and they don't have time to listen to other media and do the research. They're just being brainwashed over and over and over again. And I got friends like that. You can't bring this stuff up because they go nuts.
Yeah, and I don't think even a spiritual practice is any insulation against it, because even in my own Buddhist movement, 90% of people are completely fast asleep.
That's another thing. Ireland, is a very strongly Catholic country, and the priests and everything are all going along with this. They're saying, no, we can't give communion now or confirmations and anything. We can't do any of that stuff. Churches are closed, but the sex shops are open.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
But this is also part of the inversion, isn't it? I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. Maybe those priests are co-opted. Maybe they are aware of what's going on, but probably not. It's just the inversion. It's, society has become so dumbed down. There's so much fluoride, so many toxins, neurotoxins, so many ways in which we have lost our way.
Right. Drug after drug after drug.
Yeah. And the drug of TV, the drug of being constantly propagandized to with the false information of absolutely everything. Yeah. Once you start scratching the surface of what's going on, I mean, you realize that absolutely everything you think is true is false.
Yeah, it's nuts. And it's, for the first time, it's starting to be exposed, and they don't like it. They do not like it.
Yeah.
And they're getting violent about it.
Yeah.
It's just Windmiller in the chat says not all priests, and I says, yeah, well, that's true, not all. Because not all Buddhists, not all Hindus or whoever you have to be. Not everyone's falling for this, but the majority are, sadly.
Yeah.
I wonder if anyone, if either of the two of you have got any thoughts about why is it some people are wide awake and others aren't? What is different to those of us that sort of dare to question and those that don't?
I've never trusted authority. So I always had my eye on them. I never fully trusted them. And then when I saw stuff, I mean, it would be, yep, there it is. There it is. So once you get the notion that they're untrustworthy, as more people are starting to see now, then you start seeing more and more and more of the bull crap that they've been running over your face.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of 9/11 for me that kind of really jolted me. But then I still wasn't completely sure what happened, and I kind of let it go for a few years. But then I realized, and I really looked into it.
No, they brought them down.
Tied into all the other things like the Kennedy assassination, and there was others like the Oklahoma bombing, and there was other things, all these false flags, and again, fear. They're coming to get you. And before that, it was the Russians were coming to get you. You know,
yeah,
there's always this kind of
always fear mongering, constantly fear mongering, and that's what the voices do.
Yeah,
you know, so
is it a combination of both the government kind of pushing the fear, and then these voices kind of hitting vulnerable people as well, and getting a double dose of fear?
Yeah.
If you look at what's behind the government structures, though, Brian and Jerry, you know, we know that there is a deep satanic cult that is embedded in the very fabric of society. It's deep satanic. So, they've got everybody captive. Not everybody. I don't mean to sound like I'm resigned to it all. I'm not. But there's a great number of people that are captive of this satanic cult, and they don't even realize.
No.
Yeah.
So one of the things they do, and the voices and the mainstream media, is they demand the victim's attention. They won't just leave you alone. They demand your attention. So everywhere you go, everywhere you look on the advertisements, the street signs, the television, the radio, I mean, they're constantly demanding your attention and working it, toward fear and anxiety and brainwashing you. Yeah. So with schizophrenics, if you can break that attention, you notice they don't. Schizophrenics don't hear foreign voices because they can't understand. So if they can't understand, the voices can't do anything to them. And I think we did an interview with George, right, Brian, where he said, what I do is I break the attention. So as soon as they start talking, he starts making up nonsense syllables to block them out so they can't get their messages through. So what we need to do is turn off those television sets and turn off the radios. And
that definitely is a start. But then, Jerry, I was up in Dublin, it's the capital city of Ireland, right? And I was up there a couple of weeks ago, and all the advertisement boards everywhere, it was all COVID-19, 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 jabs.
Yeah.
So even, and then you go even to like small town, I live in a shop, something, masks, have to wear a mask to get in here and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to kind of break away from that. That's why I just sometimes have to just go out for a walk in nature, out in the woods, away from all this and stuff.
Yeah.
Connected again. Because
break away from it.
It's, this is all around us. So it's not just TV now, it's everywhere. And even when you go online on the computer, like, even you're getting all these things coming up. Oh, COVID. Man, it's hard work. But it's all bullshit. You can get through this.
I spoke to a colleague a few months ago, about 3 months ago. I hadn't spoken to for well over a year since the beginning of this, and I told her what I thought, and she said, "Oh, well, I've had the vaccine." And I told her what I thought was going on, and she said, "Jenny, don't you think you've been hypnotized?" And I said, "Well, don't you think you have, Kim?" "Oh no." So it was just fascinating that she can be blasted at 24/7 by propaganda and media exposure to the whole COVID-19 when there's nobody dropping dead, and believe that I've been hypnotized, and she hasn't. I mean, this to me is, it's a measure of just how duped and sad the captivation of the human consciousness has been, in these last 18 months.
Well, that goes right in with number 10. They maneuver for increased control over their victims. Steadily battle for increasing control over the victim's mind and actions. That's what the schizophrenic voices do, and that's what the mainstream media and deep state are doing. There's a one-to-one correspondence between the psychotic voices and what the mainstream media and the deep state are doing to us right now. They're insane. They are insane. They're They're exactly the same as these voices. And that number 12 was fit in right with what you were saying with that Catholic priest, Jenny, manipulating a perception. It said the voices are capable of causing their victims to interpret situations and information coming in from the environment wrongly to increase negative emotion. For instance, a schizophrenic may see a police car drive by their house. All of a sudden, the voices jump in and tell them, hey, the police are searching for you. They're coming to get you. And then they actually fabricate a crime that they were supposed to have committed, but they don't trust their memory enough to say, no, I didn't do that. So it's like a catch-22. So they manipulate the perception, and that's exactly what the deep state is doing now. They're manipulating our perception.
That's right.
And Jerry, to go back to 11, which you've got down as gaslighting, what we've got at the moment is, I was listening to an interview with 5 doctors yesterday, a guy called Dr. Francis Christian from Canada. He has been released from his academic role as a doctor because he's telling students the truth. And they said to him that they thought that he had some sort of mental health issue, and that they're prepared to lend him all kinds of support, anything he needs to help him through this difficult time. But until then, his role is suspended. So what you've got is people telling the truth and being called nuts.
Well, that's what's so dangerous about psychiatrists. In World War II, it was the psychiatrists who were picking out the retarded people, the mentally defective, so the Nazis can exterminate them. It was the psychiatrists who went into NATO in the 1950s and said, we want to be a part of the New World Order, and this is the part we want to play. These people are what they're doing is an outrage. It's a sacrilege to the human race.
Yeah, I've got different opinions to that one, Jerry, but that's another show in itself. But the general point coming across is that we have a criminal cabal here, and they're a small group of people, and they're coming after us all. Okay?
Yes.
And they want a genocide. They've talked about depopulation. There's too many of us. And now I've seen today there in the news about the climate change. We're on red alert, or red. What do they call it? Red. There's some, one of these military terms. The Earth is now dying. The Earth is on the verge of collapsing, burning up, or whatever the hell they're talking about. And again, when you look at what they say, there's absolutely nothing, no evidence whatsoever for what they're saying. Nothing. But they're again pushing this fear. And people are now saying, they're telling now, like, married couples who just got recently married, don't have children because that's climate change. And they're now killing all the farm animals, the cattle and the pigs and everything, because they fart too much, so we gotta stop that. And and people are buying into this, and I'm going, what the hell?
Yeah, over here they're letting complete truckloads of food just rot and spoil. To create a food shortage, to spark panic. I mean, this is the same entity that is active in schizophrenics that is active in the deep state. It's the same entity. It's the same dark entity.
And it's, when this first started, I don't know if anyone else could concur, in March 2020, that I was going to bed at night, and I wasn't afraid of the virus. I couldn't give a monkeys about the virus because I knew what was unfolding. But I was very, very scared about what they were going to do. But I would go to bed at night and my whole body was shaking. And I think the collective fear that they managed to whip up in that just a few short weeks prior to the lockdowns in March 2020, the collective fear, they must have been feasting off of it. They must have been so emboldened by it.
You're right, absolutely.
Well, it's the same thing in prisons. I mean, it's a hog's trough for these negative entities in prisons. It's a totally negative environment, fearful environment, anxiety prone. I mean, they're just feasting. And after holding these people under those circumstances, they're already unstable when they go in there. After years of treatment like this, they kick them out on the street and said, okay, you're free. They turn them loose on society, and they're in much worse shape than they ever went in. I've seen them release people I knew would kill somebody within the next few months, you know, and they let him out because he had served his term.
Yeah.
They gave him $50 and walked him out the door with 2 weeks worth of medications.
Yeah. They did that in the UK as well, Jenny, didn't they? They all the kind of sanatoriums and whatever, they kind of just let them all out, and suddenly the UK had a massive homeless problem because these people couldn't cope. And
that's right. Same over here.
Yeah. I think that was recently, wasn't it, Brian?
I think it was back in the kind of 80s, 90s, around that time.
Oh, right.
I think it was when Maggie Thatcher was in charge. I think it was, and
that's
she opened everything out and created another industry right there. You know, even the homeless industry. Let's those poor people are living on the street. Obviously, so they're going to have mental health issues. So let's feed them full of drugs and stick them into a hostel and forget about them, whatever. You know.
Well, then the only way they could survive is by stealing and robbing,
exactly,
and manipulating, and then they'd throw them back in prison again. So the prison is now the new state hospitals here in the United States. They did the same thing in the 80s here. They closed down all the state hospitals, assigned them to the mental health centers. Now, they wouldn't take their medicines to start with. So what makes them think they're going to go through the trouble of arranging transportation when they're poor to a distant mental health center and then take those medications on top of it? It was a system that was designed to fail.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And now we're seeing the end result of all this. You know, decades and decades of this fear pumping us full of poisons and all the rest of it. And now they kind of have us at a very weak point. Now let's go in for the kill.
Well, people are starting to wake up, though.
Yeah, I say they haven't got all of us. As long as
no, they don't, and more are waking up every day. So
we'll get them, because this is, again, you know, what you're taking this whole thing against good versus evil, because I think evil can't last. Evil will just destroy itself. Good will always prevail, I think, and it might take a bit of time yet before we get there. We mightn't see it in our lifetimes, but I think we'll get through it as long as we just keep doing what we're doing and putting that energy and really good intentions out there.
I've come across maybe, sorry to interrupt you, Brian, but I've come across maybe 3 or 4 people in the last week who deeply regret having had the vax, and now they realise what's going on. So these are even the vaccinated that are waking up and realising that they didn't sign up for this.
Yeah.
And
I was saying before the show, the French and the Italians, you know, the people in Italy who were vaxxed are burning their vaccine passports now. Great to see, you know. They realise, no, we were duped, but okay, we were duped. God knows what this jab will do to us, but we're going to stand now against these bastards who did this to us, you know. So
well, that's what has to happen. People need to stand up and do something. They can't just sit there.
Yeah, I know. And I'd say it could get bad, you know, because I'm sure these, you know, if the Vax project doesn't kind of quite work out for them, they got a plan B, and I don't know what that'll be. I mean, I reckon they could drop some kind of, you know, like a nerve gas bomb or something on a city, you know, and you can't see it, you can't smell it, and lots of people just drop dead.
Well, see, that's what they're afraid of over here. Once the Arizona election results come out on the shortly. You know, because it will prove that they stole this election. There's proof they stole the Georgia election. There's proof they stole the Michigan election. And now Lindell is coming out with absolute proof. So he's going to do 72 hours of all this hardcore proof that they stole all these elections. And they're worrying what they're going to do. So they've got troops moving all over the U.S. right now. They've got National Guard in all these Republican cities, and that you look at the air transport from the guy who tracks that. There's military equipment being moved all around the United States right now. So they're bracing for something. No telling what these people are going to do when their cover is blown to pieces.
Yeah.
And then if Trump gets back in, he's promised to expose 9/11 and the rest of it. So
he did promise that the first time round, though. He did promise that the first time round.
He did, yeah, and it didn't happen. I know the whole Trump thing. It's I was disappointed with the guy. I thought maybe he could do something, but then after.
Well, if he did do something, what they would do is accuse him of being a sore loser, and they'd go, yeah, you
I think
took the election.
He just didn't have, he said he wanted to drain the swamp.
He has. There's thousands of them have been arrested. Guantanamo Bay is full.
Allegedly, I'd like to see evidence of that. But
just watch the flights. Watch the flights going down there. They've got airliners going down there now.
All right. Okay.
The flights to Guantanamo have increased 90%.
So what's going on there? There's a battle then between the Biden team and the Trump team. Is that what you're saying, or what's happening?
Well, yeah. Biden he's the president of the bankrupt United States corporation. And this was a maneuver done in the 1800s where the Constitution of the United States was changed, and the Vatican took over.
Is that the 14th Amendment, was it?
It might have been. They changed one of the amendments, didn't let anybody know about it. So Biden he's a puppet. He's a brain dead puppet. The military is in control of this country right now, because the CIA, the FBI, the DOJ, the Supreme Court, they're all corrupted. Every single one is corrupted, and they have more than enough proof of it. So there's a lot of arrests that have taken place, mostly of child molesters and child traffickers, which are these politicians. But now they're moving up the line. So they're saying that he may be back in August. I don't know. Everything is so tight-lipped with the military. So what you have is all these alternative media guys watching every single move that anybody makes and then piecing together the likelihood of certain things happening based on these pieces that are leaking out. But it looks like the crap is going to hit the fan here very shortly.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many holes in this story. It's got more holes than a flipping lace doily, isn't it? I mean, it's just crazy how they can keep this narrative going. There's just too many holes in it.
Yeah, and people are still believing it.
Yeah, when I look at your man DeSantis there in Florida, right, and he says, you can open up, there's no mask mandates and none of this stuff and whatever, but then he's gone full bore vaccination. He's even talking about forced vaccination if necessary.
DeSantis is doing that now?
Yeah, that's what I heard. Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know.
You hear things.
I also heard
exactly what's going on, but
I heard today he's brought back the mask mandates as well.
Right.
No. Matter of fact, I heard the opposite. He's made it illegal for them to.
We're getting mixed messages, and nobody knows exactly what the hell is going on.
DeSantis is standing up against them. He's not. Everything I'm hearing over here, he's defending their right to choose the vaccinations, and he's defending their right not to wear the masks.
Right, so we're getting mixed messages then. So unless you're actually there, it's and know what's going on, I suppose. But over here, Jenny, as you know, Bojo Johnson there, he's gone full steam ahead. And all these.
He turned around real quick, didn't he?
Yeah. He got his Brexit, and he was he kind of. I said, "Oh, look at me! Yeah, I got your Brexit. Aren't I great? Fantastic, and all the rest of it." And now, within months, wasn't it? Because it was only a few months after that, Jenny, wasn't it, when the whole mandates came in or something, wasn't it? Or the lockdowns and all that.
Well, after the European Union thing, you mean?
Yeah, the Brexit thing. He got the general election, which was really about Brexit, wasn't it? And
apparently so. What I found fascinating about last year was that they did this ceremonial handing Britain back to its own country at the end of January, and within weeks we were into the whole coronavirus thing. So it was almost like they had to symbolically end that so that we could turn our attention away from the Brexit and over to the coronavirus. Do you know what I mean? Because mask mandates didn't come in the UK till the 24th of July. So that was months into the coronavirus. in high summer when there's no such thing as a virus, and everyone's getting vitamin D on their skin, and there's no such thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I just quickly Googled Ron DeSantis about Florida, and it says the state could defund the salaries of district superintendents and county school board members who mandate mask wearing in schools. You're right.
No, he's standing up to Biden. He's telling Biden, "Screw you." You can't make us do anything. Here in Arizona, they sent the DOJ, Department of Justice cops over here to try to upset the audit. Mm-hmm. And the head of the Senate said, "Yeah, go ahead and send them. You can bail them out of one of our prisons." So the states are now finding out what has happened, and they're shocked, and they're even running audits on states that Trump has won to show that this has been a national scam. And if they did this to us, they certainly did it to you. Your votes are counting for nothing, and you have no way. Your Constitution doesn't allow you to do what we're doing, is to fall back and dissolve the government if it no longer serves the people. Yeah. And that's what our Constitution allows to do, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're going after these buzzards.
Yeah, did you hear about the guy up in Alberta who challenged? And won. He
demanded, "You show me this virus. Show me this virus."
Yeah, she was like, "Show me the money.
They couldn't.
Show me the money. Show me the virus." Yeah,
and I've heard that for a long time. They have not isolated the virus. Oh. They just keep running these renditions of this machine, and if they run it long enough, they're going to find something, and that's what they did.
Yeah.
It's a scam. It's a massive scam, and there's going to be a lot of people, I think, getting sick from this.
Yeah.
Well, there are. I mean, anecdotally, a few months ago, it was actually in the middle of the last lockdown in our winter. We had a paramedic in one of our sessions. We did some sound healing sessions, and we said to her, "What are you picking up at the moment?" She said, "Well, overwhelmingly, it's suicide." And we said to her, "No coronavirus?" She said, "No." So,
yeah, it's amazing the number of politicians over here that all of a sudden are suiciding themselves. You know, and potential witnesses. I mean, there were three of those White House guards that at the rally. 3 of them suicided themselves in the period of a few weeks. So they don't want anybody out there telling the truth, that they let these guys in. They actually let them into the White House, opened up the gates, and that there was FBI behind that were steering them in there. The FBI and the CIA are behind all of this.
Yeah.
Do you know, just going back to your list, Jerry, number point 14, that these voices demand the victim not tell others about their presence. We're talking about censorship. They demand that nobody knows about their presence. And this is what censorship is, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. They take down all these channels off of YouTube and the internet. It's so they make it look like they're not doing anything. And they don't want anybody talking about them either. And anybody who talks about them gets knocked out too.
Can I ask you both? We're kind of going to wind up things now because we're up to 2 hours. This is a fascinating conversation, but. During this whole this last 2 years, have you seen an increase in schizophrenia, what we call schizophrenia, in the last 2 years?
Well, yeah, I got some statistics on that somewhere.
I haven't, Brian. I can't say I have.
Yeah.
I haven't been.
I haven't seen schizophrenia. I haven't seen it myself, but I've just seen this brain dead. From people, which I don't know whether that's the same thing or not. I don't know.
I do wonder whether that's the shock, to be honest. I really do.
Could be the shock, yeah, that they just don't know what's going on because, when you think about it, the last since the end of World War II, really, and into the 50s, it's always been a kind of, particularly in the Western world, it's all been very peaceful. Everyone's done well for themselves, Obviously, people do fall by the wayside, but generally, for most people, they've done pretty well. They get a job and they get married, get settled down, and all the rest of it. And life is pretty good, and they can trust the government, and blah blah blah. And the media is going to tell you the truth. And maybe they just realize that something's not quite right here, but they can't get over that. This could happen. And they're thinking, well, I'll just go along with it anyway because everyone else is doing it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And it's very sad because, like, very intelligent people, you know, very, very intelligent friends of mine who
same here.
I can't talk to because I've got nothing to say. I don't know.
Yeah, I know, exactly. I've had to, not say ditch friends, but I have to kind of distance myself from them because they're talking bullshit and I'm not interested in what they have to say anymore. I says, can you not see what's going on? They want to kill you. Can you not see that?
Yeah.
You have to be that blatant, you know?
Are they saying the same about us? I mean, I'm so divorced from that world. I mean, I'm very fortunate in that everyone I mix with is wide awake. I don't have to go into that crazy matrix world anymore. But I do wonder what they're saying about us. Are they saying the same? Those poor people.
They're probably saying the same about us, yeah. But then but it's a kind of that group, that herd mentality. But see that Jenny there and Jerry and Brian there, you know, they're all lunatics. Don't even listen to what they say, you know. And then you'll have the TV screen there going COVID. Yeah, these are the people we have to listen to, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, hold on, guys. I mean, look around you. I mean, are you seeing people dropping dead in the street all over the place? No. You know? And they just can't get it. And I'm going, it is frustrating, but then I have to pull back from it and go, right, let them on. Mm-hmm. I've warned about, I know 10 friends of mine, I warned about getting the jab. I told them, I sent them all the links.
Do not do it. Well,
I did it anyway, but this is before the whole jab agenda started. I said, they're going to push a jab agenda, watch this space. And of course, it happened. This is what they're going to be putting into it. It's going to
they're even paying people. They're paying people $100 to get the jab.
Oh, yeah, it's all these incentives and all the free pizzas and beer and whatever the hell you want, you know, you get it.
Yeah, they started a lottery in California, a lottery, a jab lottery. I mean, it's insane what they're doing. It's totally insane.
Yeah. And that's what really kind of just shook me a little bit to see that these people who are intelligent bought into this. But
yeah. What is it going to take to wake them up? What is it going to take?
I think it's going to take pure where their whole livelihoods are taken away, and that will happen. You know, we're going to see inflation go right through the roof, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Possibly see food shortages. We could see lots of other things happening.
Well, you're going to see the suicide rate increase, too, because of this isolation with this COVID crap. That's the worst thing you could do is isolate people like that.
Yeah, the suicide rates have rocketed over here, Jenny. I'm sure it's the same in the UK, isn't it? It's constant. And it's not talked about. It used to be talked about, like, we have to talk about suicide, and we don't talk about it anymore. It's all COVID.
Yeah, sweep it under the rug.
Yeah. I mean, the next phases of this rollout. You know, we've got upcoming lockdowns. We've got children vaccinated. We've got winter viruses, and we know that when this technology has been used in other species, that the minute they're challenged with a virus, they all drop dead. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we've got a horrendous winter coming with the food shortages and everything else. And you know, we need the company of good people, and we need to stay strong, and you know, we need to keep well and get outside as much as possible, keep away from the screens, and
that was going to ask you. Right, we're kind of at the end of the show now, so just final thoughts, Jerry. Final thoughts yourself. Where we are now. I would ask you as well. People who are maybe schizophrenic, or people who have family members who are schizophrenic, can they come to you and can you help them, or what? How does that work?
I have a practice. They can go to my website and sign up under consults.
Okay.
And I'll get them in when I can.
Right.
And it's done under Skype, over Skype, so I can see them face to face. But I'd also recommend they get before contacting me with that is to get our book, An Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind, which brings all this out in detail. You know, what a farce psychiatry actually is, and how they've behaved in the past, and how they're jabbing, you know, little kids with these antipsychotic drugs now, which are destroying their brain. Yeah, there is a cure for schizophrenia. It's not fast, it's not easy, and it takes a lot of work, but we have one.
But it's within us all. We're all powerful, and we can do it. We just have to be strong.
Yeah, you have to do the work yourself. Nobody can do it for you.
Yeah, nobody can do it for you. And it's like anything, you know.
Yeah, we can give you the map.
When I was fighting the banks, I had to do it myself. Well, I had friends helping me out. They were there, kind of. But when I went into the courtroom, I had to do it on my own, up against the banking system and the legal system, probably the most powerful systems out there. And I stood up and I walked out with my head held high.
Good for you. Good for you.
You know, that's where we're going. Jenny, final thought yourself. And I mean, do you help people out yourself, and how can people reach you?
I probably, I'd be happy to see people who are schizophrenic or feel they've got voices. I'm not sure what I can do. I don't have a huge history of helping people with schizophrenia. I can certainly identify and, console, etc. My speciality is chronic fatigue and anything to do with the spiritual disturbance of the soul. I'm quite comfortable working with people who feel it's time for them to grow and move on. And they can reach me on openmindtherapy.co.uk. And that's the best site to get me through.
Okay, great. Good stuff, guys.
Great.
Yeah, so thank you, Jerry.
Okay,
and Jenny.
Thanks for having us.
Great stuff. Great conversation. And
thanks, both of you.
Yeah, we got a a very challenging, rocky road ahead. I think everybody here knows that. So, and we got to get ready. We got to get ready. As you said, Jenny, you're growing your own food and getting people. That's one way of doing it. I'm looking at a friend of mine. She's got a little bit of land now, and she's looking at getting like-minded people. And we'll start food there and kind of look after each other, because sometimes maybe we have to be a little bit selfish here, because if the zombies want to go their way, let them go. But we're going to try and survive here through this, you know.
Yeah.
So we have to, you know.
I agree with you.
Yeah. Okay, folks. Again, just a final word on our friend Graham. As I said, he's doing time at the moment. He's in a prison cell in Exeter in the UK. They're trying to get him moved from there to a kind of a low security category C prison, and hopefully get him out on a tag after 9 months, maybe could be a year, I don't know. But they're working on that at the minute. As soon as I get all the details, of where he is, where he's going to be, I'll put it out there, and we'll get a letter card campaign going and just flood the place with him and keep it going. Because he'll need that. He will need it. And actually, I should bring that up because Graham has been on 30 years. He's been on antidepressants, painkillers, and sleeping tablets. Not a great mixture there, Jenny or Jerry, is it?
No, not at all.
For 30 years. And he's been trying to get off them, and he's tried all sorts of things, but it kind of didn't work. It's very hard to get off these things, and I was on antidepressants once for a year, but I did the cold turkey on it. Man, that was painful. It really was. But I got through it.
And their effectiveness is not much higher than sugar pills.
Oh, I know. Exactly. It doesn't cheer you up.
No.
This is where I would call that a spiritual disorder, because if you can't stay in your own body and experience your life here right now without the help of drugs and alcohol, then you're not really living. You're not living your life. So I would call that a spiritual disorder, because it's almost like I'm too afraid to just be me. I'm too afraid to really connect with the divine and, to really just experience my life on this planet as I am. And it's just about escapism, really, isn't it?
Yeah. They need to get on a positive spiritual path and stay there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So jerrymarzinsky.com, go there if you want to do consultation. It's on there, isn't it, Jerry? There's a
consultation section on there.
Okay,
you just follow the instructions and then the process will roll out.
If anybody has any chronic fatigue syndrome, Jenny's the expert on that. And Jenny, what's the website again? Or how they contact? It's email, is it? To get you on, is it?
If you just go onto the website, you can email me from there. It's openmindtherapy.co.uk.
Okay, great, fantastic. Thank you, guys. Brilliant conversation, and we'll definitely stay in touch. Hang on there, and we'll just play the last tune out, and we'll talk afterwards. until then, till next week, folks. Have a good week. Put your good prayers and intentions out for Graham. He's, you know where he is. It's not an easy time for him, but we're standing with him. We might there be, we're with him in spirit. Okay, and so best of luck to him. So until then, folks. Till next week. Take care.
You're on a hoax train, going off the world. Wake up, get off the hoax train, The first stop we'll be making will be Auschwitz. Tell all your friends you won't see the swimming pool. When the train station, like the theater, it's been hidden from you. Going around the world, wake up, you're on a hoax train, Going around the world, wake up, get off the hoax train, The next stop is reading a diary over in Amsterdam, written in pen and pencil. Now there's a clue. You see